Let's talk about why so many African Americans and the African diaspora are leaving Africa. And after watching countless videos, YouTube is full of those horror stories. And also from my own personal experience, I noticed there are three main reasons behind that. And so I want to talk about this today, about this issue, and explain to you what the three big common mistakes are, and also how you can avoid these mistakes and relocate to the African continent with clarity, with strategy, very important, and with confidence. And in case you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Weyni. I'm the host of this channel, Plan Back to Africa, where I teach my audience how to start an Airbnb business, a short term rental business on the African continent, and my journey of moving back to the African continent after being born and raised in Germany. And I also share my journey of traveling through the African continent with my two children and the experiences I made, the challenges I went through settling here on the continent, and also, trying to help and to inspire the diaspora to do the same because I never felt more free since I'm living on the African continent, and I'm really living in my purpose and thriving, and I wish the same for you too. So, yeah, if you're new to this channel and even if you're a follower, please comment down below and let me know from where you are watching, and also send your questions. It will be also kind of a Q&A today, and I will try to answer as many questions as possible. So I have structured this video by starting first with the first common mistake, and then also how you can avoid the mistake, the strategy that you should use, and also after each mistake and strategy, I will allow a few questions and I will take my time to answer these questions. And then in the end, I hope if we have enough time, I will be able to answer more questions. And so let's start with the first common mistake, which is choosing the wrong country. That's where it basically starts. And so the reason why many people choose the wrong country, and I'm speaking from my experience because I have made the same mistake when I first moved to the African continent in 2019. And the reason why so many make this mistake is because they make an emotional decision rather than a rational one. What do I mean by that? They are basically, there's the perfect example is the year of return, right? So many African Americans, they moved to Ghana after 2019. And, there was, I felt there was a shift and a momentum. And so the problem was that many went straight in without considering so many important things. And yeah, it was kind of like no real preparation behind that move. And so, because of that, many walked into the African continent, moved to Ghana or other African countries in disillusionment. And what is behind that is often that we tend to romanticize the African continent and specific countries. And then that's the reason why we kind of ignore the challenges and the risks. We don't want to even hear about that because we feel like we are following our purpose and this is a calling. But believe me or not, every government, if it calls back the diaspora, right, they also expect something in return. So they want to, which is nothing wrong about that, in my opinion, but they want to attract investment, foreign investment. They want people who have skills to come back to the African continent, who have money. And so, unfortunately, many people didn't consider that. And yeah, they followed their heart and thought, okay, I have to go back and move back to my ancestral land. They felt this connection, right? And yeah, I made a similar mistake when I moved to Ethiopia in 2019. There was also a momentum. There was economic growth, right? I think it was one of the fastest growing economies on the continent at that time. And there was a big movement. A lot of Ethiopians from the diaspora moved back to Ethiopia. And also, yeah, the news, the first female president, and so many things that happened. There was also a big shift in Ethiopia, which is why I also felt this calling. I felt this calling. I have to go back to my motherland, you know, and I did that ignoring all the warnings. People warned me. They told me, Weyni, this is not a smart time to relocate. There is probably a war coming up. The political situation is very unstable, and the relation between the different political parties in that country are extremely tense. And so I ignored all the warnings. I'm going to be honest, I didn't do any research. The only thing I did was securing myself a job, which was enough for me to make that move. And even though I don't regret that move because it taught me so much, I lost a lot. I lost family members because indeed, 2 years later, not even 2 years later, a devastating war broke out that cost almost a million people's lives. You might be surprised. Yeah, people don't talk about that, right? But yeah, I lost my business. I lost a lot of money. I left overnight, was depressed. And this could have been avoided if I had done my proper research. And based on that research, if I had made a rational decision rather than an emotional one. And so the question is, how do you actually choose the right country? And the goal here is to first shortlist 3 to 5 countries. And the way I consult the members of my private community, and if I could do it again, would be by first asking myself, why do I want to relocate? So you have to ask yourself, why do you want to move to the African continent? And you have to understand that there are push and pull factors. And so push factors are the factors that make you want to leave the country that you're currently residing in. In my case, that was Germany. And the reason, the push factors in my case were especially the rise of right wing populism, and as well as, yeah, I felt that the quality of life was not there. I was constantly stressed, even though I was not stuck in the hamster wheel. I had my own business at that time. I had an Amazon business, and I've just got my degree in cultural anthropology and African studies. I was working as an anti-racism trainer, and still I felt burned out taking care of the kids, cooking, cleaning, working, no one to help me, you know, and so I was just drained. And the main pull factors that brought me in were basically the opportunities on the continent. As I've mentioned, in Ethiopia there was this economic growth, and so I wanted to be part of that growth, and also build a better life and a legacy for me and my children. Also, I was another push factor. I wasn't happy with the education system in Germany as well as in Holland. I felt that, like my own experience when I went to primary school, it doesn't the curriculum is not made for Black children, children of color, African children, and it basically denies them ownership and the achievements. They don't teach them about the history of the African continent. So one pull factor was for me giving my children a better education that is more rooted in and more centered in African history, and also representation. And so, yeah, these were my main push and pull factors. But there are other examples. Like, for instance, I took some notes for this video today. Another example for push factors, very common, is people trying to escape the hamster wheel, the high cost of living. Yeah, it's rising everywhere. I just came back from Germany and I visited my mom for 5 weeks, and the children spent time with their father, and I was shocked. I was wondering, how do people survive? And so that's one of the main push factors from what I'm seeing that makes people want to leave. And then also the dissatisfaction and the disconnect, right? The lack of community, and then the lack of a sense of belonging. And also, I met people who said, I want to leave because I don't see many good investment opportunities here, whether in the US or in Europe. Bad weather, also a common issue for many people. And examples for other pull factors is many people, and especially in the US, but also in Europe, right? The diaspora as well, they are seeking to reconnect with their roots, with their culture. And that was also what pulled so many people to Ghana back then, right? And other reasons are, for instance, they are seeking for a healthier lifestyle, a better environment to retire, right? And so the key here is to get clarity by asking yourself the questions. And why this is so important, because let's say your main push factor is escaping everyday racism, right? Then probably countries like South Africa and Namibia would not be the best countries to relocate to for you. I visited these countries, and I must say, not all of South Africa. Like, for instance, Johannesburg is way more black and mixed, and Cape Town, on the other hand, is compared to Johannesburg, very white dominated. And you might hear stories even 30 years after apartheid has ended, that could re-traumatize you, that bring you into a state of range. I had this feeling in Namibia, seeing that less than 1% of the population, of the total population, descendants of Germans, were still owning over 70% of the land. And then seeing the black population, black Namibians, living in slums, And so, yeah, this could be very difficult if that is one of your main reasons to leave the West. So, yeah, clarity. It's about clarity. The second question, and this is so, so important because it can determine your success, is to ask yourself, what are my unique advantages? And trust me when I say we all have them. And what I mean by that is, it's so important to understand what advantages you have. I will give you some examples now that you can leverage, that could not only make the relocation and immigration process easier, but also the process of starting a business. And so the question is, now you might ask yourself, now, how do I identify my unique advantages? And I've identified now, for the case of Africa, and also from consulting members in my private community, four main advantages that you can bring with and that you can build upon. The first one is, you have a certain profession or a certain skill or many years of work experience. And so if that is the case, you have to research, where on the continent are these skills? Is this profession in high demand? And that way you will get more clarity. For instance, if you are, let's say, you are in the developmental field, right? Maybe you have a profession as a midwife. You could research for programs in your country and projects, these development projects, where they are looking for midwives to work for them in, let's say, Botswana, Kenya, or whatever. And the good thing about relocating this way is because you get a secure salary, mostly also in foreign currency, US dollar, euro, or whatever. And also, the entire immigration process will be much easier. They will help you with relocating, with finding housing, and just, navigating through the new country and the whole paperwork. And this is, by the way, what I did when I first moved to Ethiopia. I joined a program which was about knowledge transfer. So they were looking for professionals that could work for a period of time for up to 3 years in their country of where they have their ancestry. So the basic requirement was that if you want to go to Ethiopia, you have to be from Ethiopia. And they had this program for Ethiopia, for Kenya, for Cameroon, for Morocco, Tunisia, I believe. And yeah, it was a great program because we were paid the salary on the German standard, right? So it was a well paid job for me. I was working for the Ministry of Tourism in Addis Ababa. And I knew that I want to start my own business in Ethiopia and want to use my salary that I get from this job to build a business. And that was only possible because I still had my own business, the Amazon business. And my plan was to find a property in Ethiopia and start an Airbnb business. I had previously taken a course, and so I learned how profitable this business is and the many benefits, especially for people who like to travel, like me, building yourself a home base wherever you go. And so you don't have to check in a hotel. And since I was traveling to Ethiopia frequently and I was tired of checking into a hotel in Addis Ababa, I decided to build myself a home base there. And during my absence, if in case I decide to return back to Germany, have another source of income. And so I decided for a 6-month contract instead of a 3-year contract and use that time to build that business there. Another way to ask yourself is maybe if you don't want to um, get an employment on the African continent, but rather start your own business, right? You can research where on the African continent there is a need and a demand, a high demand for that service that you can offer, that you have experience with. And one beautiful example is, for instance, there is a couple from the US that is part of my private community, and we had a one-on-one consultation last week. And initially, their plan was to settle in either Ghana, Sierra Leone, or Cameroon, because they have done an ancestry test and they saw that they have their ancestry in these specific countries or regions. And so they I noticed really quick that they were very fixated on these countries and didn't even consider other options, right? And that reminded me on the mistake I made when I moved to Ethiopia. And so I asked them other questions, and then it turned out that the husband has over 18 years of experience, work experience in property management. And I told them, listen, why not research where on the African continent there is a demand for property management companies and then start there, right? Like make a rational decision rather than an emotional one, instead of going to where you feel that your ancestors come from and feeling like the obligation to go back to these places. Go where you are needed, where you can make money. And so after doing their research, they changed their mind. They noticed that countries like Tanzania and Kenya have a high demand of property management services. And this is also because especially Tanzania is experiencing a massive tourism boom. And so when you compare how many hotels, Airbnbs, and boutique hotels are opening up, there are not enough companies that can offer property management services for them. And so, yeah, that's how I was able to help them to get into the right direction. And this is a perfect example of why you should really focus on your unique advantages and also, yeah, the reasons why you want to leave. Now, another way, the second thing how to identify your unique advantages is to ask yourself, do you have a trusted person or network on the ground, maybe in a specific country, right? This can be family members, this can be friends, and people who have done what you have done before that you know personally. But beware, there are so many Black expats on the African continent who offer consultation services for relocation, but they don't know what they're talking about, right? They're charging you a lot of money and they themselves haven't even done what they are preaching. Maybe they're not even residing legally in that country. And so it's important to be very, very careful who you choose. And yeah, still having someone on the ground that you can trust, and I want to highlight trusted network, a trusted person there, not someone you met one day and who is from Ghana and who moved back to Ghana, who you met recently, someone who you really would trust, and who you believe knows what the person is talking about. That's key. That's really key. That can make the whole relocation process, the process of settling there, the process of feeling a sense of belonging, right? Much, much more easier. And so, one example I had also last week when consulting one of our community members, when he entered our community, he was unsure. He was thinking more about Kenya because, as you know, there is a big hype about Kenya as well. And many people also joined the community to initially with Kenya and Zanzibar in their mind as the country to relocate to and start their business in. And that's because they have seen it worked for me, but it doesn't mean that it will work for you. And so while he was at first considering Kenya, so he was basically unsure. And when we had our consultation call, he was in Kinshasa in the DRC, but he is based in France. And so he was expressing how he was unsure, he couldn't decide. And so I asked a few questions, and it turned out we did some research because this community is specifically built for people, for African Americans, the African diaspora in general, who want to build a home base and a sustainable short term rental business on the African continent. And so I was going through the Airbnb platform with our member, and we realized the immense potential of starting an Airbnb business in Kinshasa. The nightly rates were insane, and he was able to research prior to his arrival the monthly rent that you pay in Kinshasa for such a property. And so the profit margins were extremely high. Like for 5 nights, you would pay around 800, 900 euro for a basic two-bedroom apartment. And also, what we quickly noticed is that not only is the competition very unprofessional, right? And easy to beat, but also there is not much competition. And that's also for a reason because Kinshasa seems to be a very difficult market. And that was the reason why he, without even thinking of solutions on how to overcome the challenges, didn't even consider his home country, right? Kinshasa, as the place to start this Airbnb business. And so through the consultation, he shared what would be the advantages that he would have by starting in Kinshasa. And the main advantage was that his father lives there. And so he has a trusted person on the ground who could help him and support him while when he goes back to Paris, manages the business remotely. And so the father can handle the daily operations on the ground, find cleaners, manage turnovers and everything that has to do with being hands on the ground. And so that's when he started to consider Kinshasa, when seeing the opportunities, when understanding how he can leverage on this massive advantage of having his father on the ground, right? There's no one you can trust more than your mother and your father. They always want the best for you. And so that's when he started to look, okay, there is this problem of electricity and bad Wi-Fi. And so we looked for solutions on how to overcome these challenges. He did his research and found out that there are certain neighborhoods and areas in Kinshasa which are less affected by power cuts. And so, yeah, this was so helpful for him. He was so grateful because he didn't even consider that. And so, yeah, that's how, building on this unique advantage, he was able to decide for the right country for him to start his business, right? And so, the next thing that could be your unique advantage, a massive unique advantage, which I had, for instance, is you can work remotely, or and you are a digital nomad, meaning you have your own business. In my case, it was the Amazon business that I was running when I moved to Ethiopia. And so the first step when you fall in under this category, when you have this specific unique advantage, right, which is so beautiful to be able to work location independent, decide when you want to work and how long you want to work. So you should then research which African countries have fast and reliable Wi-Fi, and also which African countries offer digital nomad visas. So most of the time, which is obvious, when a country offers digital nomad visa, they probably have fast and reliable internet, right? And so countries like Kenya do that, for instance, or just recently they introduced the digital nomad visa, or South Africa has that. So you can research that, and you should really be very mindful when choosing that, because also here I made a mistake. So after I failed in Ethiopia and moved back, I started a business in Zanzibar in Tanzania. And so I stayed there for 3 months with my children. And I was going crazy because the internet was so horrible. I really couldn't wait to leave. And so that's after my time in Zanzibar, I then moved to Nairobi, Kenya, and I was in having really fast and reliable internet. And so you really need to choose a right country for you. Otherwise, your business will suffer, right? And we don't want that. And yeah, that was the point with the digital nomad visa. And it's interesting. We had a similar case also among in our community with one member who is based in Europe, originally from Burundi, and he also worked online. So he had his own marketing business that he could manage from anywhere in the world. And so at first he planned countries like, I think Botswana was on his list, Mauritius, and Kenya as well. And so now he decided to start the process for Kenya because, as a Burundian citizen, also the process of getting residency in Kenya is much more easier because Kenya is part of the East African community, like Burundi, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda. I think these are the countries. And so it only made sense for him to go the route of acquiring residency in Nairobi, where he could continue his work. And so this is so important to understand. Where can I continue my work? And last but not least, another unique advantage that you could have is also similar to this case of the member from Burundi, is if you can easily obtain residency through your parents, through ancestry, right? And most of the time, it's enough to have one parent from a specific African country. So this is a little bit different than the ancestry and DNA test programs that are available for African Americans. And it's much more easier for African diaspora. But I'm always shocked to see how many people are sleeping on that, really. And I get it. I was there too. My mom literally begged me for almost 6 years, please, Weyni, start your process of getting your Ethiopian diaspora ID. I won't be here forever. Who knows if I die tomorrow? Who's going to help you? So, yes, that's like if you should do one thing now, right? Especially in the crazy world we are living in. Really, seriously, like it's insane. The US has just rebranded and renamed the Department of Defense to Department of War, which is actually more accurate. But also, they are drowning in their own wars, Europe, the US, and you never know when you would need an exit plan. And you should be prepared. And the best way to prepare yourself is to get either citizenship or at least residency for an African country where you could go to when shit hits the fan. And so the process is actually quite easy. In my case, you just have to go to the immigration proof through birth certificate that you have a parent that comes from this country, and then you go the process through the embassies, right? And that's how you can acquire not necessarily citizenship, but they mostly offer an alternative, like something like a residency, so that you can reside for as long as you want. And of course, enter visa free. You can register a business. You are seen and treated like a local. You can buy land. You can register a business, and so many things you can do except of voting. But who cares? I didn't care for voting anyway. So it was not my priority. For me, the priority was having residency. And so, yeah, it's important to also understand the difference between citizenship and residency. Also for African Americans who are so fixated on obtaining residency through citizenship through ancestry, not knowing that by registering a company, right, in an African country, the process is much, much more easier most of the time going this route than going through the ancestry DNA test route. We always hear how people have acquired citizenship through ancestry and DNA tests, but they never share how difficult and how long the process takes, and also how much money you have to have for this route. Whereby the route of registering a legal company, right, and then once you have that company, you can apply for residency, is a much faster, less complicated, and also more affordable route. And residency can also ultimately be the pathway to citizenship, first by getting permanent residency. Mostly there is a minimum of years that you have to reside legally in a specific country. In Kenya, it's 7 years, right? When you have resided in Kenya for 7 years, you can apply for permanent residency. And so, citizenship is not always, beneficial. I think residency does the job most of the time. And so, if you have a parent somewhere from a specific African country, use that advantage and apply for your diaspora ID, for your residency. And yeah, as I said, I got mine through my mom. That way, it was very easy for me when the contract, my work contract at the Ministry of Tourism expired after 6 months. I was able to stay in the country. I was able to register a company and then continue running my business. And also, there was a similar case the other day with a lady who is from Uganda, based in London, in the UK. And she initially planned to invest and start her Airbnb business in her home country, Uganda. And so it was very funny. The story was so beautiful. She traveled to Uganda and she used Rwandan Air. And then I think she missed her connecting flight because she had a stopover in Kigali in Rwanda. And they were checked into a beautiful hotel. And then she decided, okay, when I'm here, let me just use my time here and do some research if Kigali, Rwanda might be a better place to start this business. And she was also building on that advantage that she had as a Ugandan resident, right? And Uganda is part of the EAC. She was able to easily start a business in any of the countries that belong to the EACs, including Rwanda. And so she spent her time in Rwanda researching, and how the process of registering a company goes, and yeah, she found out that Kigali is a very profitable location to start an Airbnb business. The tourism industry is also growing there. And yeah, she met amazing people and saw the opportunities, and she shared them with us. And that's what I love about our community. We had this group call, this weekly live call, and I, for instance, I don't know much about how life in Rwanda looks like. I wrote my bachelor thesis about the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda and this dark chapter of the history. And I knew that it's a clean place, but I didn't have um, a better idea of what life is like there. And she really, it was so lovely to hear from her own experience, sharing what she saw, that people come out every Sunday, I think, or once in a week to do a community cleanup to keep the city clean. That once a month, I think it's a Sunday, cars are not allowed. They try to encourage families to walk, to exercise, and also how cheap the rent is. 250. She found an apartment in a decent area, a decent apartment for only 250 US dollar per month, and so what was also beautiful about this conversation was that other community members who were participating in the live call immediately jumped in and said, listen, if you are looking for a property, I once met a real estate agent in Cairo who has many properties there and has his real estate agency. I'm happy to connect you with that person. And others who were still unsure of where to start felt inspired, and nobody was gatekeeping. And they immediately thought, okay, it makes sense to visit Kigali and have a look, you know? And yeah, this brings me to the next point. But, you know, the point that the second mistake that I want to talk about, the big common mistake that people make, is they don't do enough research on the ground. As I said earlier, they jump straight in. But before I'm going to that, coming to that mistake, I want to go through the questions that I'm getting here and trying to answer some of those. Happy New Week. Hi, Abraham. They say hello from the USA. And what else we have here? Learning the language or local dialects will go a long way. I might get to that later. And even why not now? You know, learning a local language is sometimes key and can be a big advantage. Like, for instance, when I studied African studies, I learned Swahili, Kiswahili. And that's how I got to Zanzibar for the first time in 2008. So I could have made the rational decision of choosing Kenya or even Tanzania, Zanzibar, because I had a trusted local network on the ground, people that I trusted and knew for 15 years since my time of studying in Germany. And, you know, this unique advantage that I was bringing, knowing the local language, is so helpful because it helps you to avoid scams. They cannot talk behind my back. I understand everything, almost everything, enough to know, okay, he's trying to scam me. So, very important point, Dion. Karura Forest and Ngong Hills, congratulations to Ethiopia. Yes, our dam. It's our dam. Yeah. They are making always a big trouble about that. You know, Egypt, um, manufacturing an issue where where there shouldn't be one. But that's maybe a topic for another episode. What else do we have here? I'm planning to buy an apartment in Kenya. Do you know trustful agents I can contact? Yes, I do, but I will also tell you more about this in common big mistake number 3. I will get to that. Smart investment. You need to separate FBAs and Black Americans. Most Black Americans outside the internet don't even know the term FBA. Most Black Americans look at Africans as family. FBA is a cult internet movement. I absolutely agree. Yes. Keyboard warrior, that's what they are. Okay. So it's so great to see so many of you here in the live chat. Life is hard in Africa, true, but let's not pretend that life is easy in Europe or in the US. It's life is always hard, no matter where you are. So I rather suffer and fight and struggle in a country where I feel like I'm living in alignment with my purpose, with my vision, with my goals, rather than in a country where you are not welcomed, where you're not appreciated, where you're sometimes even hated, where they want you out. And so life is difficult everywhere. So, okay, let's get to the next big mistake. As I said, they don't do enough research on the ground, you know, and this leads to falling for a hype easily. I see there is a big hype around Kenya, similar to the hype around Ghana after 2019, when the government announced this initiative, the Year of Return. And instead of first traveling there, and I'm not saying traveling there as a tourist, right? I'm not saying travel there, enjoy Dirty December and think, wow, what a vibe, I want to live here. When I say travel there, I mean with the intention, with the sole intention, no noise, no distraction. Your sole intention should be to do proper research on the ground and stay as long as you possibly can. And if you cannot stay long, return 2, 3 times. That's what I did in Kenya. I think I visited Nairobi 4 times, 3, 4 times before I finally registered the company. And so, this is so important. And this can sometimes open your eyes for issues and opportunities you don't see at the first time, that you didn't even have in mind. This example that I just shared of the sister from Uganda who now decided to invest in Kigali, that was actually a coincidence. She landed in Kigali and spent time there by coincidence. That was not the main purpose, right? And so many people said then, okay, I'm going to look at that. And when you have 3 to 5 countries in your mind, there is a great hack that you can use, and that is use multi-city flights instead of round trip flights. That way you can visit many different locations in one trip, and most of the time these flights are also way more cheaper. I booked a flight in 2024 that was my flight out of Europe, right? From Germany to Ethiopia, Egypt, South Africa, and I paid only 490 euro. I checked from Washington, D.C., the same flight was 1,000 US dollars. So, yeah, try to incorporate the different countries and locations that you have shortlisted in the first step when choosing the country, to include them in one trip. And then you have one job, when you're on the ground. Get info on the process of obtaining a visa, and don't trust the information that you get online, because sometimes it can be very discouraging. Let me give you an example. When you research online what the process is for registering a company in Zanzibar, in Tanzania, you will read that as a foreigner, as a foreign investor, you need to have a minimum investment capital of 2.5 million US dollar. That's when many people, like, they are out. They think, oh, that's impossible. So they don't even consider Zanzibar as an option, or if there's maybe a way around it. And yes, there is. So, and that's what I'm also sharing with my community members. And so, research on the ground. This is the information that I obtained on the ground when in Zanzibar, just to give you an example. Secondly, besides researching the visa and immigration process, research the cost of living, rent, school fees if you have children, groceries. You have to understand what your monthly expenses will be. And also, by being on the ground, you will be able to feel the vibe, and you can ask yourself, does this country, city, or place meets my demands? Will I be able to live in alignment with my values, with my purpose, with my vision here? And so that's what you have to ask yourself. And most importantly, how much money do I need to make monthly to be able to cover all these costs? And this basically immediately brings me to the third big common mistake: bad financial planning. And that's what many people don't understand. They think life on the African continent is cheap, affordable. And while it can be more affordable, but you have to understand that if you continue to live the standard that you are used to from the West, right? If you insist on having cheese every morning for breakfast, you will suffer. Cheese is so expensive, right? Just to give you one example. And so you need to have this numbers, right? And then what you need to do to avoid the third big common mistake that so many people from the US and the diaspora in general make, that forces them to leave the African continent and move back, that because they are broke, is financial planning. You have to be strategic. And this is why what I always recommend, what you need to do, what helped me was, once you have researched how much you need to make monthly, right? You have calculated all the costs that you have. That what you do then is a strategy called reverse engineering. So you have to ask yourself, okay, let's take an example. I need 3K monthly to be able to live here, right? And then the next step would be you calculate backwards. Which steps do I need to make? How much money do I have how many of my products, how many pieces of my products do I have to sell, right? To be able to achieve that goal of 3K per month. And so in my case, it was understanding that because I already had my Airbnb business in Ethiopia, returned to Germany, and was trying to make my move again to try it another time, right? And so I understood, okay, I need for Kenya, for Nairobi, I need this amount of money. And to be able to make this amount of money, I need 3 more properties that I can rent out via Airbnb. So I focused on that first, on building these properties. And it was only when I had this secure and steady cash flow that I decided I am now giving it another try, and I'm moving to the African continent again, Nairobi to be precise. And yeah, that's really like the safest way to relocate and avoid this mistake that so many people make. They feel drawn to a country, and they are um, idealistic, and they go with faith, with hopes, with dreams. But you need money if you go to the African continent. Not even enough, at least a steady cash flow, researching what you need, right? Money, not faith, not hope. You need money, steady cash flow. And I would only move to the African continent, and I recommend that to everyone out there, when your business succeeds, when you have achieved that goal, not just 1 month, but steadily over the course of a couple months. And yeah, basically the safest way to relocate to the African continent is as a business owner, where you have steady income, secure income. And as I said, I only made that choice to come back once I have reached that goal. And yeah, that's so important. People go there on their savings, and the monthly cost of living eats up their savings. And before they can even look, they don't have no money anymore. And so you need to avoid that. So start by, and that's what we're also teaching our community members, start by building a business on the ground, a profitable business, one that you can manage remotely. But unless you have achieved that, right? Don't come here. Stay in your job. Stay in your country. For the love of God, please. It's too risky. And so that's the smartest way, the easiest way to relocate. And really, smart investment is the key here, right? And so many people ask me, also somebody in the comment asked me if it's a wise decision to buy an apartment. And I also had community members in our last live call who asked me, Weyni, we want to buy an apartment in Nairobi, and then want to make money with Airbnb with this apartment. And that's a big mistake that so many people have. Even people who have, a lot of savings, who have 200K, 300K on their bank account, right? And these members of the community, compared to them, they had limited funds, right? So we're talking maybe of buying a property of like an apartment for 50, 60K. And so I am always against buying property or buying land as the first thing that you do, your first investment when you relocate to a country, or as the first investment. Instead, what I always recommend and what worked for me, right? I'm everything that I'm sharing here, my experience, my knowledge, is what worked for me. And so also you have to make your own experience, you know. I cannot promise you that it will work for you as well, but I'm sure that when you follow these steps and implement these strategies, that the chances you will fail will be minimized, you know. And so I always recommend to start by renting a place. Start small. In the Airbnb business, that means, for instance, instead of investing into buying a property, start with a business strategy called rental arbitrage. That means you rent a property and then sub-rent it on a short-term rental basis via platforms such as Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO. There are thousands of platforms, right? who um, who serve different markets. And so, yeah, so even when you have a big saving of 200 and 300K, also among these kind of returnees, there are horror stories. They come to Ghana, they instantly, instead of starting small, you know, getting to understand the market, learning to navigate, to understand the process, the legal framework, instead of doing due diligence, they invest half of their savings, 300K, into buying a villa, into buying a plot, without even knowing, will this asset be able to sustain itself? Will it make me more money, right? Or is it a liability? And so, yeah, I'm against buying an apartment, but you know, starting small, smart investment is the key here, especially for people with limited savings. And yeah, so rent first, understand the system, to avoid the risks, you know, to avoid being scammed. And then when it works out, then you can think of buying land. That's what I did when I had my properties on the island of Zanzibar in Ethiopia. I had my steady cash flow. I was able to put money aside. That's also immediately in the very beginning. Um, I bought land, two plots on the island of Zanzibar. And I did that because I had the confidence that when I built a property there for Airbnb, it will be profitable because it's working for the other properties, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I have 3% before my laptop shuts down. I want to go through some questions and give some time to ask more questions. So, please, can you start a business after you come in with a retirement visa? Yes, you can start a business at any stage, right? All you need to do is you need to register a company, right? And there are two ways to register a company. You can register as a foreigner, which requires a high capital investment in Kenya. So you would get the investor's visa, and the minimum capital is 100K, so that you can be the sole shareholder of the company. And in the case of Zanzibar, as I said, it's 2.5 million. However, this shouldn't discourage you. There are also other ways around that. If you have a trusted person on the ground, you can register a local company with your local contact as the partner, you know, a joint venture. And then you have to also research what are the minimum shares by law in that country. And that varies. I think in Kenya, they have 0% minimum share, while in Zanzibar and Tanzania, 70%. The owner gets 70% of the shares. And this also scares people, but with the right lawyer, that's the process that I went through. There are they can draft additional agreements, but it must be an experienced lawyer. They can draft additional agreements, shareholding agreements, to to secure and give you safety for your shares, and avoid being scammed also eventually. What other questions? Oh, Pierre, We are proud of you. You are the moons. Thank you so much for your kind words. Rwandan and Somali diaspora based in Kigali, sending you much love. I can't wait to visit Kigali after that last community call I had. Oh man, that's so beautiful. What else? How can you contact me? Okay, people asking for a contact. I will drop the link to my private community here in the comments below. There is a 7-day free trial where you can have access to me. We will have an onboarding call where you can ask your questions and I can help you together with my partner, Marvin, who's running the community with me to help you navigate, build the right strategy for you, and also join our weekly live calls where you can, meet the other members, learn from each other, and get some inspiration. Okay. Hello from North Carolina. So, guys, family, ladies, 1%. I'm so grateful for you. Thanks for watching. Please drop your questions in the comment below. I will charge my laptop now and I will answer all the questions, as many as I can. Thank you. Have a blessed evening.